What are some of your favorite art books, like instructional, how-to stuff?
The one that started everything for me was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Okay.
That was the foundation. That was the one that changed everything for me. It just put me on the path. I was like 12 years old, went to the local bookstore, and I saw this book, and it said how to draw like Marvel, and I was already starting to get into some of the comics, and it was like, wait a minute, if I learn how to draw like Marvel, maybe one day I can work for Marvel. So I begged my mom, and she was like, okay, if you're gonna put it to use. I think I put it to use, needless to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks again,
That was
man.
awesome.
Favorite instructional art books. The Andrew Loomis books are very good. Figure Drawing for All It's Worth, that's terrific. He also did a book called Creative Illustration, that's really good. For basic anatomy, Bridgman's a pretty good source. That was one of the teachers that taught Norman Rockwell. Once you get to a certain level, more sophisticated level, the book by Vanderpoel is really instructional. He was one of J.C. Leindecker's teachers. I don't recommend Bern Hogarth stuff. Bern was a friend of mine, but I find his anatomy books, his figures don't seem to have any bones in them. It's just all muscle. The bones are so good at structuring figures, it seems foolish of me to leave that out.
Yeah. Who's your cartoon crush?
Man, Russ Manning, the Tarzan artist, before I knew him as a Tarzan artist, he did a series of comic books called Magnus Robot Fighter, and Magnus's girlfriend, Leisha, she was so hot. And she had this dress that it sort of was a gradated dress. It was transparent at her knees. You always got the feeling of, oh man, if only it was just a little different, I'd see something. But it never was.
What's your favorite instructional art book?
How to Draw the Marvel Comics Way.
Okay.
That's when I was a kid, growing up in France, my dad sent that to me when I was like 11 or 10, and I read it from one page to the end and backwards, and then all the exercise in it, and I was like, oh my god, I think that's the only art book I've ever read in terms of like instructional thing.
Yeah.
You could only draw to learn, so I didn't really read anything else. So.
Perfect. What are some of your favorite instructional art books? And you can definitely pull that one out right there on your.
One of my favorite instructional art books. This book is amazing. It's amazing. And oh, I just so happen to have it right here. It's called The Silver Way. And this is a book all about character design if you're interested. But really some of my books were, I follow with so much of like the old masters in a lot of ways. I discovered Leonardo da Vinci, really, in all honesty. Not that I discovered him just now, but his books recently, and was reading through those. But I love books like Andrew Loomis and George Bridgman and any books like that I can find. So they get old and classic in that way, but they're very informative. And I think just learning that foundation and the basics takes you to that next level, even if you don't know what you really want to do.
Nice. Do you have any favorite art books?
No, I think drawing from life is better.
Ah, there you go.
You know, I had a few students before, and what I would have them do is go to a coffee shop, look at someone for 5 minutes, don't stare at them, you're gonna get in trouble, and spend the next 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You're not gonna nail that in the first go, but if you do that every day, keep it up for a month or two, what you're gonna learn is what the art books can't teach you. It's the gestures, the angles, the positions, and stuff like that. You know, the judging of camera distance. Because if we're talking about comic books, that's what it's all about. The believable gesture and storytelling and angle and camera distance of all these scenes that you're trying to draw. And those are going to improve like tremendously. How many muscles you have on your biceps and your tricep, that's a lot easier once you got the basics and your fundamentals, taken care of.
The books that I was looking at, there was the Christopher Hart book, how to draw cutting edge comics, how to draw simplified anatomy, and then Andy Smith's book, how to draw dynamic comics. So those are the three that I really used quite a bit.
It's going to be the same answer from probably anybody that went to our school, but Andrew Loomis, all his books, definitely. Gary Martin's book on comic book inking, for any inker, pretty much a must. Bridgman, I don't know, I have like literally 10-foot stacks of books at my house, but mostly of art and artists. But instructional books, there aren't that many.
What are some of your favorite instructional art books?
Oh,
I've got a room that's just full of books, absolutely. The floor is just covered in them. So I really like James Gurney's Colour and Light. I thought that was a cracking book, and it was quite pertinent to what I was doing. He was working in the field of illustration. A lot of it was applicable, so that's great. The Bridgman books are fantastic for anatomy and breaking it down into its composite elements. I had a great book by Harold Speed, who was like a art Nazi who worked in the UK, and he was a fantastic portraitist, but he was like, you have to lay your palette out this way, you have to do this, and there was no other way. But it was really informative, and it was kind of because no one had taught me. It was what I needed, some rigid, structured methods to approaching oil painting. So that was a good little book. But yeah, there's hundreds of really good books. But I always advise people, it's like if you're a musician, a guitarist or something, don't go for the average guitarist. Go and try and copy Hendrix or the guys who were really good. Don't go picking up on the guys who are okay. Go for the top guys, and then you hope a bit of that will rub off on you.
Robert Beverly Hales, Drawing Lessons from the Great Masters. Not Anatomy Lessons from the Great Masters, which has his name on it, but it's not really his book. Drawing Lessons from the Great Masters is a single book that gives you such a good broad overview. 100 master drawings analyzed by someone who really knew what to point out in them.
And he's got book reviews on his website with all of his book recommendations. What are some of your favorite instructional art books?
The animation survival kit, that's a big one, especially if you want to do animation. For story, definitely Story was a great book. Back in the day, I was obsessed with books from the National Russian Academy of Art, because their studies and their live drawings are off the chart. And they're just so amazing. Because they give you drawings that are graded A, B, and C, kind of like here. And when you see the B's and the C's, it just makes you cry because they're so amazing. You're like, how is this a B? This is an A++. So it's nice to know that they're striving for that perfection. So I remember that was a big influence when I was growing up. And I still pay attention a lot to academic drawing, even when I'm doing my kind of more push stuff.
Any favorite instructional art books?
There's a ton of them, and I could go down the list of the stuff that I'm sure you've heard in all these other interviews. If these are being spliced together, you're going to hear, Loomis and all that stuff. My favorite one, and I'll butcher his name, so I'm not even going to try and say it, but the book is Framed Ink. I think it's one of the...
Framed Ink.
Framed Ink is a phenomenal new book. In fact, his whole line of framed books are great. Yeah, there's
How many does he have?
He's got Framed Perspective 1, Framed Perspective 2, Framed Ink, and he's coming out with a new one. I can't remember the name.
Okay.
It might be Framed Composition or something like that. He's got a new one coming out if it's not out already. He's phenomenal.
What superpower would be most useful to an artist?
Infinite endurance, I suppose. Never getting tired. That would be the best one as an artist.
What's your favorite or some of your favorite instructional art books?
I guess it's an instructional art book, but it's Understanding Comics by Scott Mccloud. It's an amazing book. I mean, it's really more about the theory of visuals and art in general, but sequential art especially. But I learned so much about them, like about symbology and about the way we see things and how we interpret lines and art and imagery. I tell my students to read it all the time. I mean, it's on my list of required reading for each one of my classes. If I had one book to recommend to anybody, it's Understanding Comics by Scott Mccloud. It's brilliant, and it's in comic book form, so it's really, it's a fast read, but you learn a lot.
Yeah. So you have a full list for your students?
I generally have to have a list of stuff,
What else is on that list?
Designing Characters and Creatures by Mark Holmes, which I think it gives a lot of little short assignments that you can give yourself if you want to essentially challenge yourself to improve your character design portfolio. So I think that's a really good book.
Biggest cartoon crush?
Krang, of course, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, maybe Aku from Samurai Jack is a close second. But you know, you can't beat Krang. He's awesome. All he wants is his own body.
Any favorite instructional art books?
I'm kind of more of a child of the internet, you know, like my career kind of grew up in that era of which you were starting to see more and more art materials showing up online, such as the Proko channel.
Oh wow, can you tell me more about those?
Oh man, I love this channel. No, it's honestly, that's one of the first things I stumbled upon when discovering YouTube, is like your Proko stuff about the fundamentals of drawing.
Yeah.
And that's the first time that I saw it. Actually appealed because it was kind of fun, it had some personality. Whereas books, it's just like you and the pages, and you know, there's great writing and everything, but I think having the interactive element of YouTube videos, that's what really helped me. Also, just like online tutorials, I'd suck up whatever I could find on DeviantArt. Gumroad is an amazing resource. I've gotten stuff, you know, Anthony Jones before doing his mentorship, some stuff from Eitan Zana to learn some environmental stuff. I'm really curious about doing some Learn Squared courses. Alex Fagini in particular is like one of my like concept art gods, and he has actually a whole course about doing 3D, which is something that I really want to get into. It's pretty intimidating. So yeah, as far as like influential learning material, it's mostly like internet stuff, just little gems across, you know, the scope of the internet. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite instructional art books?
Bridgman books, those series are amazing. Of course, Loomis comes to mind. There's so many books that he's created, but I love all of them. Imagine FX is a pretty cool magazine with tidbits of little knowledge gems all over the place. That's a really good one as well.
Understanding Comics by Scott Mccloud. It's the best. Like, actually, you can go through all 3 of his books in that genre. My understanding is actually making a new one for just general visual arts. And it's amazing. I mean, it's a book I think everyone should read, but it's probably the best.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. What are some of your favorite instructional art books?
How to draw the marble way? No. I actually never really read a whole lot of instructional books. But I would watch a lot of like YouTube tutorial videos and just like practice figuring it out on my own. So yeah, I mostly would watch video tutorials, and then just like by making my own mistakes, I kind of learned how to draw how I draw.
Who's your cartoon crush?
Oh, Aladdin. I always had a crush on Aladdin.
Nice, that's a good one.
I liked the new Aladdin too, so I have a thing for Aladdin, I guess, I don't know.
What are your favorite instructional art books?
Instructional art books.
You can name your own.
Well, okay. My own book, the Dynamic Bible, is one that I like to push as much as I can. But you know, like I said, even this book right here, talking about the previous question of my mentor, Norm, this is an echo of Norm. That's what I always say, is that this is not me, this is people, dozens of people behind me pushing this information. Norm being one of them, and all the people behind Norm also too. This kind of information of how-tos and instructionals, when people are teaching, I like when people recognize the histories of things and where it comes from. So for me, this book is very much an echo of all the history of the instructors from Art Center. But of course, my book, Scott Robertson's, right? How to Draw a Book. Fantastic, very technical, which is why I actually like to push mine, because it's a little bit easier to kind of jump into, and then go to Scott's book, because that's where you get the more advanced information. Framed Ink, also fantastic for storyboarding, framing, cinematic composition. That's what I recommend.
Awesome. What are some of your favorite instructional art books?
Right now, there is not a real book, because I've studied on very old books in the academy. So right now, I would suggest for real, like your video.
Okay.
No, really, they are like the best video tutorial, much better than books, as I think, much better than many schools around. I use the same kind of structure for the anatomy and the light and the shadows. People right now are very lucky, the students, because they can have this kind of tutorials online, and so I think this is one of the best I would suggest. And this is what I do, and I suggest to my students every day. So,
thank you. What are some of your favorite instructional art books?
When I was coming up, it was Loomis, and then it was also step-by-step graphics back in the day when it was a really good magazine. it had like all those great illustrators, like you'd have like Thomas Blackshear going through and showing his step-by-step, his gouache process, which didn't even exist back then. I mean, we're talking the 80s, so there wasn't like all this stuff that you could pull right then. But so, you know, Loomis was the first, because I always have arguments with people, oh, Bridgman. Nah, I'm a Loomis guy, not a Bridgman guy. What are you talking about, you know? Like I said, step-by-step for graphics was great because you had all these great guys in the industry showing you how they did their stuff. I used to do writing for Imagine FX, would occasionally have some great stuff, you know, 3D World for the 3D World stuff, because I do a lot of CG and a lot of 3D stuff as well. And then, you know, finding places online where people are posting. I mean, there's some great tutorials all over the place, you know? Yeah. I mean, Marshall turned me into the Etherington brothers. Oh my God. You guys want to see some really cool tutorials? Google that, art books, you'll find them. It will correct the spelling that I'm butchering the guy's name. Two British brothers.
Books are a great way to boost your skills, but videos are pretty awesome too. That's why you should check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. You can find classes in everything from illustration and animation to creative writing, fine art, and more. Skillshare's premium membership gives you unlimited access to a bunch of high-quality classes from experts working in their fields to help you level up your skills and make you a better artist. One skill that'll make you a more marketable artist is digital illustration. That's why I recommend watching Jerome Vogel's class, Digital Illustration: How to Use Procreate. He goes through his process of creating really fun illustrations, going over how he sketches, colors, adds texture, and finalizes his work. If you're even thinking of getting into making art on a tablet, you should definitely consider his course. Skillshare is also really affordable, especially when compared to in-person classes and workshops. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month. And since Skillshare is sponsoring this video, if you use the promo link in the description, you'll get your first 2 months free to try it out, risk-free. So make sure to click on the link in the description. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching this series. This is it, our last Comic-Con video for 2019. If you like videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll be asking the pros more questions at next year's Comic-Con, but what should I ask? Did I miss something that you'd like me to cover next time? Let me know in the comments, and I'll write them down for next year. See you later.